Hello, welcome back for Season 3, Episode 11 of Uncanny Oddities. What is time? So, I wanted to go ahead and start this off before I get into all my ranting and all that nonsense. Let's go ahead and start off with a grounded view of what time is considered in three different categories. First, we'll go with the philosophical view. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant have argued that time is a mental construct and it simply helps us to understand change in events. And from this perspective, time exists in our minds rather than an objective reality. I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. Now, the scientific view. In physics, time is measured and can be quantified in various ways, which, let me inform you, we have simply invented. We made all these measurements up, whether it's seconds, minutes, days, hours, years, weeks, months, whatever. We literally invented all those names for those periods of time. Time, you know. But according to Einstein's theory of relativity, time is relative and can vary based on speed and gravity, suggesting that what we perceive as time can indeed feel different under different circumstances, such as torsion, which Kozyrev talked about, which we'll get to that later on, and the spiritual view. Many spiritual traditions emphasize the present moment, suggesting that the past and future often distract us from experiencing life fully. So, this is just saying, like, be present in the now, and that's why they call it the present because life is a gift. That kind of ideal, that kind of ideology and belief system. Now, going back to the philosophical view, it says that time exists in our minds rather than as an objective reality. I just wanted to point out there is no such thing as objective reality because every single thing that we see on a daily basis, every single thing that we have ever experienced is interpreted through our senses and filtered through our brain before we actually experience it. And our brain and our senses, once it gets to our brain, it processes what our senses perceive and it filters that through our past experiences and memories throughout our lifetimes, which is different for each individual person. Therefore, different people experience different things, and scientifically, reality as we know it is subjective, and no human being, as far as science is concerned, no human being has ever nor will ever experience true objective reality. And we could get into a whole thing on that with electric universe theory, but I'm going to try to keep things mostly on topic. So that is something that I find very interesting is how we literally invented everything in relation to time. So let's go ahead and get into Kozyrev, okay? The Kozyrev mirror, very interesting to me. I've been studying this for months now, probably close to a year, and this is very interesting to me. So basically, what it says is that his name was Nikolai Kozyrev. He was a Russian astrophysicist, and he suggested that time might be a physical entity that could be manipulated, and he conducted experiments involving mirrors and their effects on time perception. So basically, he thought that time was fluid and could be manipulated, like we could move through time under the right conditions. So he invented what he calls the Kozyrev mirror, which, keep in mind, was classified by the Russian government. So take that as you will. But basically, the mirrors are typically concave, often made from materials like aluminum, and they were arranged in specific configurations to amplify energy fields. So they were typically arranged in a spiral pattern based on Fibonacci numbers. I'm not going to be vague. I'm going to tell you what it is. I don't know the exact measurements, but it was based on Fibonacci numbers, like the Fibonacci sequence, and it was supposed to be in a sacred geometrical spiral. And that was part of what would amplify the energy fields and help you understand, what was going on and how to travel through time. Supposedly. Supposedly. Don't want to get in trouble with YouTube for spreading misinformation. Don't want that. So that was the physical design. And his idea was he believed that these mirrors in this particular design and pattern could manipulate time and space, allowing for communication with different dimensions or forms of consciousness. Because supposedly, when he first discovered this, he was basically looking into a mirror in his own that he had built, and he supposedly went back to when he was about 5 years old and saw himself and had a very strange experience. And then once he started to realize that it was him at the age of 5, he kind of got snapped back into reality as soon as the younger version of him turned around and looked at him. He kind of got snapped back into modern time, is how the story goes, supposedly. So, he believed that this was a way that you could interact with consciousness at different forms of time. And that kind of makes me think of the multiverse theory, because in the multiverse theory, they suggest that, at some points, because it's an infinite number of possibilities. So they suggest that at some points, you might actually be able to have universes that are at different points in time. Like you could go back in time to the medieval ages, but it would just be a parallel universe that had not advanced as far as we had. Or you could go into the future and, where they have hover cars and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. But it would actually just be right now, the present, but in a parallel timeline where they didn't fight with each other. They weren't so divided, and they actually, worked together and had an interest in learning, and, didn't get all greedy with money and didn't worry about their ego, and they were actually able to, cohabitate and work on things more important than, what we do now. Sorry, not trying to go on too much of a rant there. But, maybe they did a better job in their timeline, so they were more advanced than us. But it's still just right now, but in a parallel timeline, a parallel universe, if you will. So that one was always really interesting to me to, think of it like that. Because he said that there were these things which he called torsion fields, which is basically what would, twist up and bend the time into that spiral shape. And that was what would allow you to travel through time, uh, because of Einstein's theory of relativity. He actually used that, and it worked together with his Fibonacci sequence spirals. It's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to this. Now, there are also stories, in addition to time travel, there are stories about beings called observers who warned them that they are entering the mirror realm far too much, and it started to become dangerous, because once Kozyrev, had all this, of course the government wanted in on it. So they, got some Kozyrev mirrors as well, and they started working on it. And while they were working on their own experiments, they were told that these observers started to pass on warnings that, hey, if you keep coming in here, it's not going to end well. Like, you really need to stop doing this. The world is going to end. Like, seriously, stop. This is bad for you. And so some reports suggest that individuals using these mirrors have experienced phenomena similar to time travel. such as time dilation or altered perceptions of time, such as Kozyrev himself when he went back and got to visit himself at around age 5, when he, the one we were talking about earlier. And there were other people who who claimed that they could see themselves at different points of their life. Some of them got to communicate, and others were just a disembodied observer, unable to communicate with anything. Now, digging a little deeper into their supposed contact with these entities known as observers, there were stories abound, many, many stories, of people claiming to have encountered entities which they referred to as observers, who are thought to be other dimensional beings or aspects of consciousness that exist outside of conventional time. And to take it a step further, some people even have the idea that these observers exist outside of time for the sole purpose of watching over humanity and trying to make sure that they don't destroy themselves. And when humanity gets a little too close to self destruction, these observers decide that it's time to interfere. Not in a negative way, but they feel that they must pass on messages to other people in order to help them at least minimize, if not stop, then at the very least minimize the damage done by the rest of the world. And those people, the ones that come to help and try to minimize the damage, they are known as observers, and they're simply here to help. And that's why they try to warn you, hey, something bad is going to happen. There's some dangerous stuff going on. You might want to, rethink what you're doing. You might want to rethink some of your, stuff you got going on. So that is the story of the time travel and the observers in relation to Kozyrev Mirrors. Because, you know, time as we know it does not exist. Like I said earlier, seconds, hours, whatever, we literally just invented all these different words to explain different amounts of time. But at the end of the day, it's all just cellular entropy. The only time that truly exists is right now. And I don't mean that in a spiritual way, like, don't think about the future because you're not living your full life or anything like that. I mean, literally, scientifically, the only time that exists is right now. There is no past, there is no future. There is only now. And as we continue to exist, our cells in our body start to entropy. And eventually, after enough, time, our bodies will start to decay. But even once our bodies decay, the soul still is there. And I know soul, typically sounds like a very spiritual or religious word, but it weighs 21 grams. That's right. It weighs 21 grams. They did an experiment to try and test the weight of a soul, and that, yes, they did account for, voiding your bowels at the end of your life and all that. They counted for the blood and the organs and the muscles and all that stuff. They counted for everything. And the mathematical difference between when someone was still alive and after they had passed away was a difference of 21 grams, which was really kind of interesting because they actually made a whole movie about it, but they tried to bury the research and they try to say it's just fiction. So it's very interesting because it could be fiction, but it could be true because they do hide a lot of truth in fiction, as we've seen with some of the stuff coming out recently, and I'll just leave it at that. Now, I'm an advocate for truth, and I think that, because they say that, a lot of people will argue against the Kozyrev mirrors, but my argument that the Kozyrev mirror actually did exist is the Russian government literally like classified the information for a very long time. So my question is, if the Russian government actually went through the trouble of classifying the information and saying it's top secret, why would they go through all that trouble if they didn't, at the very least, believe that it was true? And then you got to be cautious of the placebo effect and the law of attraction and people's beliefs, because beliefs can be incredibly powerful. And I truly, genuinely believe that they can actually shape your very reality if enough people believe in the same thing. As I always say, the truth is whatever 51% of society believes. Whether it's true or not, if 51% of society believes in something, then it becomes true, just because of that power and that spiritual belief. So, my last question for you tonight is, what do you think of time? Is it real? Is it fake? Or does it even matter? So, you know, as we always say, stay uncanny. Thank you for coming out, and we will see you next time.